everybody. It's our Finance, Children and Young People's meeting. Can I say a big warm welcome to our Youth Council reps, Olivia, we know, Will and Kaya. Have I said that right? Brilliant. Obviously, we've had the apologies for absence. We'll start with Mark Joy, please.
Apologies for Councillor Gilbourne and Councillor Galvin. We do have one substitute, Councillor Brake.
Welcome, Councillor Brake. We've got Councillor Hamadishi joining us later, and then we've got some apologies. Unfortunately, the wonderful Leanna Rogers, the head teacher rep, is having to step down due to work commitments, but we thank her for what she's done, and I'm certainly going to miss her. Anybody else? And Leanne Trotter from Health Watch has given her apologies too. So number 2 on the agenda is record of the last meeting. Hope you've had a chance to look at the minutes. Any corrections? Any amendments? Okay, so I'm able to sign those. And any urgent matters? Number 3. No? Disposable pecuniary interests? Any of those this evening? No, we're flying through this. Okay, well, I'm glad to say this is item 5, and we've got a financial theme. So we're looking at the 3 papers which we've all had a chance to read, and there's a 10-minute presentation, and they come under the draft budget, revenue budget and capital budget, and we're going to be finished those by 7:40. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we do got a quick presentation. Hopefully it'll be 10. It may run a little bit longer than 10 minutes, so apologies if it does. So Mariah, myself and Andy will run through the slides, but as the Chair said, they kind of largely are the kind of the reports that are in the pack, just summarised with a bit more extra information in some cases. So next slide, please. So just in terms of going through what the presentation will cover, so we'll quickly go through what the Children's Young People kind of overview and scrutiny committee services are, a little bit about the budget and the funding summary. We'll then look at the current year revenue forecast position, the current year capital forecast position, and then the 26-27 draft budget. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just in terms of what the overall kind of committee's responsibilities are, as it says up there, it's around development of the council's revenue and capital budgets insofar as they relate to the functions within reference of this committee, together with the regular monitoring of budgets and the capital programme. Next slide. This is the list of all the kind of the services that are in the remit of this committee, taken from the terms of reference. When you look at the actual reports, the council's budget is actually built around operational directorates. So you'll see that in some of the budget reports, we present some elements to this committee and HASC, for instance, like public health and the directorate management team. Next slide. I will then pass over to Mariah to take us through the next section.
Okay, so one of the most common questions I'm asked is what do we fund from the general fund and what do we fund from our school grants? So this slide shows a selection of those expenditures that we fund from each side. It's not meant to be an exhaustive list, but really a flavour of what's in each of them. So things like our mainstream transport and our SEND officers we fund from the general fund, whereas things like our early years funding and our admissions and Medway test team we fund from the DSG grant. Next slide, please. Our schools and academy funding formula will be presented to the Cabinet in January and February. It's a way to calculate and distribute funding between our schools and academies in a fair and transparent way. It's funded by the schools block of the DSG, and Medway are proposing 3 changes to that formula this year. 2 of those changes have already been consulted with schools, and the 3rd change schools will be consulted in December before it goes to the December and January school forum meeting for their approval and ratification. Next slide, please. The DSG is the major school grant, but there are a couple of others. There is the Pupil Premium Grant and the Universal Infant Free School Meals Grant, for example. But like I said, the DSG one is the biggest, and it's worth just over £385.5 million. It's split into 4 blocks of funding. Each block has its own set of rules and regulations and how it's calculated and distributed to Medway, and how Medway then distribute it to our schools, academies and providers. For example, the schools block has a mandatory 99.5% pass-through rate to schools. If you want to pass through less than that, i.e. 99%, you have to get the schools forum approval and the Secretary of State approval. So in the interest of full disclosure, we did ask our schools forum to transfer 1% from our schools block to the high needs block this year. Unfortunately, our schools forum did not agree with that proposal, and we have written to the Secretary of State to request disapplication request to transfer 1%. The schools forum did, however, agree to transfer the original 0.5%. We expect to hear back from the Secretary of State by the end of December. As an example as well, in terms of the early years block, that has a mandatory 96% pass-through rate to providers, which will increase to 97% from 26-27. Next slide, please. The next few slides really are looking at our current budget and how they're split between the DSG, school grants and our general fund. And most of them are DSG funded, except if I go on to the next slide, education, as you can see, it's a bit more of a mixture. Some of our services are either wholly funded by the general fund or wholly funded by the DSG, while others are part funded by the DSG and part funded by the general fund. As an example, probably the worst case one for that is the education planning and access team, where our mainstream transport is funded by the general fund, our admissions team is funded by the DSG, and our planning and review team is part and part funded. Some of the other grants that we receive, such as our PE and sports grant, are actually funded by a mixture of the two. Next slide is all about our public health, and I actually changed this to the public health grant rather than DSG, but there's not much else to say in that respect. Next slide, please. And the next slide, please, because you're still with me. So the next few slides are looking at our revenue budget monitoring for the current year, which was reported to Cabinet in November. Overall, on the addenda, it shows an overspend of just over 9.948 million, which is an improvement of 1 million from the previously reported round 1 monitoring figure. However, the areas that are overspent in the remit of this committee are showing an overspend of 3.4 million. Next slide. This is, of course, net of the DSG movement, which is showing an overspend of 2.9 million, because that is not included within that overspend. Next slide, please. And then next slide, please. If I move on now to our safety valve, coming in at the 31st of March 2025, our DSG overspend was 16.398 million. We were expecting to clear our deficit by the 31st of March 2026. However, our safety valve plan is slightly behind schedule, and we now expect to fully recover by the 31st of March 2028. That is in line with the statutory override experience. In terms of our round 2 monitoring position, we are forecasting to overspend by 2.948 million on our DSG services this year. Although there are 4 blocks of funding within the DSG, we cannot separate them. So at the end of the year, we have unders on overs on our cost centres, because we are in an overall deficit position. All of those underspends go into the DSG deficit, so we can't separate them out effectively. Next slide. And I'm passing over to you now, Andy.
Thank you, Mariah. So this slide, if you look at it in the third column of figures along, the capital budget for this area totals just under £20 million. Just over £18 million of that is funded by grants, £500,000 developer contributions, and around £1 million of that is borrowing. The majority of the programme, which is more than £18 million, is about delivering additional school places across mainstream and SEND schools, including the creation or delivery of facilities to support schools to grow. There is a fairly small projected overspend at this point of £57,000, which is quite small out of the budget of nearly 20 million. That really relates to a scheme under Basic Needs SEND for pre-beaches at Rowans, and that's installing some temporary accommodation in there in advance of the actual beaches project. The scheme is underway, but it's been delayed due to additional works required. Rental for the temporary buildings will need to continue due to the ongoing delays. There are some overspends on this scheme, totaling 371,000, but that's been offset by some underspends at Rivermead and Strood Academy, respectively 207,000 and 107,000. The remaining 57,000 will be requested as a capital addition funded by unallocated SEN grant. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, take on to the next slide, please. So we're now going to look at, just quickly run through the 26-27 draft budget paper, really. So this first slide is just about kind of where we are, how we got to where we are. So local authorities have a statutory duty to kind of set a balanced budget each financial year. So we are required to calculate how much it will spend in performing our functions. Then we calculate how much we'll receive through government grant, business rates and fees and charges. The remaining difference is how much we kind of must raise in council tax. In practice, as council tax increases are restricted by referendum limits, the council tax increase is effectively capped, meaning that budgets have to be balanced by either reducing expenditure or increasing other income. So we've been working to develop the budget for next year since the summer. We presented the medium-term financial outlook to the Cabinet in August, alongside the capital strategy was presented to the Cabinet in September, which sets out the Council's requirements and aspirations for capital investment. So the Council's draft budget for 26-27 was presented to Cabinet on the 18th of November, and in accordance with the Constitution, BSD Overview and Scrutiny Committee refers it to the other Overview and Scrutiny Committees. The committees are asked to comment on the budget proposal within the remits of their committees and forward comments back to BSD ONS for them to forward onto Cabinet ahead of the budget meeting in February. As with last year, the detail is kind of provided in the body of the report instead of through appendices, so hopefully it's a clearer and easier report to understand, and we'll go through that when people have questions later. Also on that slide is a little bit of context around our overall kind of financial position. So for 24-25, we had a £5.5 million overspend, but we also budgeted to use EFS, so exceptional financial support, of 14.7 million. So the total EFS required in 24-25 was 20 million. The 25-26 budget was balanced using 18.1 million of EFS, and the current 25-26 round 2 forecast is 9.948 million, as Mariah said a moment ago. Our non-earmarked general reserves balance sits at 10 million. Next slide, please. So the next two slides really just kind of a table taken out of the actual draft budget report, and show the position of the council overall. Overall, this reflects growth in the budget requirement of £40.942 million. There is income growth of £33.279 million, and it also reflects that we are not currently planning to use EFS, which we had budgeted £18.184 million for in 25-26. Now, the overall budget gap of that, if you skip to the next slide, please, that bottom line figure there is 25.897 million. That is the current position that we've reported in the draft budget. Next slide, please. So the next couple of slides are just kind of the service-specific pressures that fall within the remit of this committee, or pressures and kind of savings incomes that have been agreed. So in terms of children's services, the main kind of pressures are driven by demographic growth and kind of inflation uplifts, alongside some investment in kind of placements efficiency, and then there are a raft of kind of savings proposals which totaled £4.2 million. Next slide, please. In terms of education, the main areas of increase are a £1.528 million increase on SEND transport, and some investment in staffing capacity to meet our kind of statutory assessment timeframes. And the bottom line on there about updated DSG and school grants allocation is just kind of reflecting the current anticipated increase in kind of those grants, kind of reflected in how much we will spend in the directorate itself. Next slide, please. Sorry. So in terms of corporate projections, we've currently projected a kind of a 3% cost of living increase for staff pay. We are also kind of awaiting confirmation of our employer's pension contribution rate following our triennial review. We are expecting that to reduce our contribution by 2%. That will generate an overall council to the saving of circa 1.8 million, which will reduce that draft budget assumption we referenced earlier. Next slide. The next couple of slides just to go through the MHCLG, so the Ministry for Housing, Community and Local Government policy statement, which was issued a couple of weeks ago. So that alongside this policy statement, they published a kind of comprehensive review to the kind of fair funding consultation. It is fair to say there were more changes in those documents than we were expecting. Just a few bullet points of some of the more kind of relevant points. So there's a continuation of a recovery grant, some technical changes to kind of dampen floors, which are kind of guarantees that effectively councils don't lose out too much by changes in overall kind of national funding redistribution. They've removed the remoteness out of the area cost adjustments for all all needs formulas apart from the adult social care relative needs formula. And then something that affects kind of us in this committee is that there are an increased number of grants kind of being rolled into the kind of settlement funding assessment, and 4 of which are being called consolidated grants. So those are the public health grant, the children's social care prevention grant, local authority better care grant, and the homeless prevention grant. There are also kind of a whole raft of changes to business report retention scheme. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, can you go back one? Sorry, thanks. So also in the policy statement, there was a statement around recognising the challenging financial context for local authorities, and confirmed that there will be kind of an exceptional financial support scheme for those authorities requiring assistance. The last paragraph on there kind of also points to the fact that any support should be time limited and temporary, and that we should have clear plans to kind of deliver improvements and service transformation to return us to financial stability over the kind of the period of the multi-year settlement. Next slide, please, which is nearly the last one. So what does that all mean for us? Well, unfortunately, it's difficult for us to kind of translate that all into what it actually means for Medway Council until we get the kind of our final confirmation of funding allocations through the provisional local government finance settlement, which is expected in mid-December. As I referenced on the previous slide, there have been a number of changes, more than we were expecting, which has made it a bit difficult for us to predict exactly what it means, although in reality we've already been quite optimistic in reflecting an expected increase in that grant income in the draft budget that is presented to Cabinet at this point in time. On to the next slide, which is the last one. So where do we go from here? So obviously this is a couple of days out of date, seeing as the Chancellor's statement happened kind of last week. The one kind of salient kind of, or the most kind of relevant point to this committee in that statement was the government's intention to take on kind of SEND funding from 28-29. What that actually means for us or anyone else at the moment is still pretty unclear. So we wait to hear further kind of confirmation about that. So as I said a minute earlier, we're waiting for the local government finance settlement, which is expected week commencing 15th of December. The impact of that will be reported to Cabinet in January. We're currently going through the various ONS committees for consideration, comments and proposals around the existing draft budget. And at the same time, we're undertaking a series of meetings between corporate management team and portfolio holders to agree kind of further proposals. All of that will kind of culminate in a proposed budget being presented to Cabinet on the 10th of Feb, and from that point on to Council for a final approval on the 26th. That concludes the presentation. Hopefully it wasn't too long, and so happy to take questions.
Thank you. Stephanie.
At Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee last week, a question was raised under this item that's been referred to CYP for officers to answer. It was asked, due to the rising cost of EHCP assessments, whether the council had confidence that the money it saved through the introduction of the London banding system was realised, given the need to invest to meet the additional demands of EHCPs.
Celia, could you answer that, please?
Yeah, thank you. So the cost of EHCPs hasn't risen. The number of EHCPs that we are processing has risen, and that's why the costs have gone up. The banding system has been in place for some years now, and that wasn't the contributor to the increase or the growth in EHCPs. The growth in EHCPs is a national growth. It's been seen since April and May this year, when the SEND reforms started being leaked through the press, and the concern that EHCPs would be removed, particularly for children in mainstream, has caused a number of parents and partners to apply for EHCPs to try and get those in place before the reforms come in. So we have a doubling of requests since April and May. We have spoken to the DFE. That is a national issue.
Thank you. Anybody else? Wayne?
Thank you, Chair. The report details, and you actually referred to it as well, that the council seems to be relying more on EFS, and sorry, that's exceptional financial support. In 25-26, it recalls 18.184 million that was used to balance essentially the books. But we're suggesting in 2026 that we're going to do more or less the same. And you just referred to within the, sorry, you being David, sorry, sir. You, in the appendix that you just referred to, stated that the Ministry for Homes, Communities, Local Government policy states that the time limit and temporary, it's time limited and temporary and requires a clear plan to deliver the improvements and transformation. So what precisely and what service transformation has Medway actually achieved since we secured the EFS for the 25-26 to demonstrate that the council is moving away from the continuous reliance on the government bailouts, which at this current rate is going to be unsustainable and putting huge financial pressures upon our council's funds?
Yeah. As you say, we have been kind of utilising EFS over the last couple of years. As part of when we kind of applied for kind of the initial kind of EFS kind of request, we had to undergo a SIP for kind of assurance review, which kind of we kind of participated in. One of the kind of things that came out of that was kind of to do kind of a fit plan, so a kind of a tracking kind of what savings we've delivered over the years. That is reported through Cabinet and does come through to kind of owners committees. I won't go into the specific details that are in it because I won't remember all of those bits and pieces. But so that's one of those things. But ultimately, the pressures that we are experiencing as a council are demand-led pressures. So whether it be in kind of the remit of this committee in children's care and education, or be it temporary accommodation or adult social care, they are time limited. So people have done lots of good work to kind of manage that kind of pressures. Pressures kind of are exceeding beyond what we've been able to plan to do and kind of achieve so far. The next stage of that is obviously this fair funding review, which means that we'll get additional kind of funding to Medway Council overall until we get the allocations of that, on hopefully kind of early in that week, the 15th of December. It's difficult to say exactly how much that will kind of impact our ability. What that does do, though, is that gives us a multi-year settlement, which enables us to kind of then plan the resources we've got and what we need to, the targets we need to kind of achieve to kind of bring that budget back into kind of resembling some kind of balance by in a kind of time frame. I mean, it's not going to be overnight, these things.
Okay. Chair, I know Mark had his hand up, but can I ask a second question? Is that possible, or does time not permit?
No problem.
Okay. The second one, and I personally agree that officers needed to have pay rises and to make up for the shortfall that they've had. But these pay rises have equated to approximately 10%. Recruitment and retention risk, which was demonstrated at SR 54 in one of the tables, is a live risk. But I'm intrigued to understand, and actually I'm sure taxpayers and all of us around here would like to understand why these significant investments of taxpayers' money are failing to actually solve long-term staffing crisis across the children's services, because we do seem to be having an issue with retention of staff. And I know that everyone's done so much since I've been on this committee to try and retain and recruit against the impacts of London salaries, for example.
Thank you. I think recruitment and retention of social workers is a national issue. I think Medway are taking great strides in respect of their recruitment and retention campaigns. So you'd have seen in the media, we've launched our new recruitment video. We are seeing success in recruiting locum to perms. I think this year that we've seen 11 so far, so that's a success for children's services. And what we're hearing is that people want to work in Medway. For our posts that we're advertising, we're seeing a large number of applications are coming in, which are good applications for our authority in children's. So I think we're pushing as much as we can to support that recruitment and retention of our staff. We've taken forward a induction programme for all our staff, where when they start with children's services, they'll have a period of 5 days where they're non-case holding, and in other local authorities and previously in Medway that didn't happen. So we're ensuring that right from the start, staff have the right start with Medway, and that's having a huge impact. We do stay interviews, which are undertaken by a principal social worker, really understanding the reasons why Medway is a place that people want to work in, and that we do exit interviews as well and learn for why people are moving on. Our exit interviews are telling us that we're not always getting it right, but actually on a number of occasions that people are moving because of personal issues and promotion, but we're also supporting people within children's services to seek promotion within our own services and look at people's learning and development. So potentially the current area that they're working in isn't for them, but actually we're helping them to support a team where they can grow and learn their knowledge and skills in a different part of children's services.
So there's been a huge increase on what we did last year, for example, and the developments then are going to work to fruition for our children's services. So thank you for everything. Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks, Wayne. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking through the figures, just a couple of points with regards to revenue budget, one for children's services and one for education. Looking at the monitoring client support packages, projected to overspend by nearly £1.5 million this year. Just wondered what's driving that. Also on education, send and inclusion, projected overspend of 1.384 million. And then one looking at the draft budget for next year. This year we're forecast to spend 86.4 million on children's services. And next year we're budgeting for 76.5 million. Just wondered where we're managing to reduce that budget by 10 million. With education, forecast 115 this year and going up to 120. I do understand that probably by the increase of amount of children going to school within the area as the population increases. And the last one was the Directorate Management Team. We're looking at spending 2.7 million this year, reducing to 2.46 million next year, which is saving 0.2 million. I'm wondering how you're doing that when we've potentially got an extra person, although it's temporarily, but it's potentially going to be for the whole of the year at a senior management level. Thank you.
So I'll take the first one about client support packages. So that's where we're supporting children to remain within their family or within their foster carers. So it's an avoidance of them moving into care and then seeking a placement which the costs would be more than what we're paying in respect of client support packages. packages. So potentially we're avoiding breakdowns of children living at home with their carers, their parents, their family, and coming into care by supporting those packages. Yeah.
Thank you, and I'll do the send and inclusion. So the overspend in send and inclusion is down to the assessment team because of the doubling of EHCP needs assessment requests that we've had since April. So we had the project, the backlog team built into our budget, but that was expected to have finished, and we've had to keep some of those on now to cope with the increased demand that have come in. So we had forecast for it to go once the backlog has finished, and the backlog is finished, but because we've got a doubling of the needs assessment requests, we have kept some of those on so that we don't fall behind in meeting our statutory time frame in terms of assessment, of which we are currently now above the national average. So.
And then in terms of the Directorate Management Team and the 2.3 million. So the Directorate Management Teams holds the what we call the cost of living allowances and the market premium budget for the Directorate as a whole. And once we know what the actual amounts are in each division, we then transfer the budget to those divisions. So at the moment, that spend is literally a holding position. And in terms of the reduction in children's social care, it's not quite looking at comparing apples with apples. So one of the current rounds of monitoring includes about £9 million worth of what we call management service recharges, which for the budget builds we take away and then we add back at the end of the process. So really the reduction in the in the children's budget, for next year, would be better looking at those individual tables, which is about £336,000.
And might I like to add that children and young people matter in Medway, and investments is prevention. It saves money, it saves families. You and I know about being in foster care and being in special guardianship. Rather than short-term fixes, we want to make a clear commitment about expanding early help, inclusive education, in-house, as Kelly's already mentioned, foster care, because prevention is morally right, financially right, and that's the Labour and cooperative way, and that's the best for Medway. Thank you. Sharon.
You sort of stole what I was going to say, Jo, but I was just going to say that I think the proof is in the pudding that we're on that right way, because I have heard that more people are applying for Medway jobs. There's lots more people and suitable applicants, which means we're doing something right, which means that if we start doing knee-jerk reactions now to stop that, we could be going backwards. We need to keep Medway a place for children and keep that going. And the client support, again, is going to stop children going into care and added costs that will also, in the long term, bring their places down. And you were doing the right thing in SEND because you got that time for the EHCP's timescale down, and it was out of your control what the next step is. So I feel like the cogs are going in the right direction, and to put a hold on them and try and reverse would be the wrong thing for Medway and the children in Medway.
Thanks, Sharon. Back to Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification. The reason asking about the budget and potential reduction of 10 million is that I do not want our children, the money that we're spending on them being cut to fund other services, because, as you said, it's not just a Labour and cooperative, it's everyone that sits in this chamber, that children matter, and we want to make sure that the funds are there to make sure that our children get the best start. Only last about client support packages, so what was talked about, I knew about that, but I didn't actually realise that's what client support package was, obviously on the wording, so it was just for clarification on that. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Mark. Leah.
So I just generally wanted to commend officers and the Cabinet and just the General Council for just the ability to do so much more with less and less. I think there's been a decade of underfunding and cutting council grants, and I think we just somehow managed to pull out the bag and make something that balances every year. So just a general commending to everyone for that. And then I think we touched on it earlier, but I wondered the fairer funding model, if we know any of the detail on that and how much difference it's likely to make across the piece. And then the only other bit was I was a little bit confused around the 88,000. So far be it for me to query spending money on what is essentially Sure Start restarting, but I just wondered why that is capital funding if we already have a ton of sites that, as far as I was aware, were purpose-built and with early years development in mind. So I just wanted to make sure that we still have access to those sites and that this isn't us having to rebuild a service that existed.
So the Start in Life funding grant that came down had both a revenue and a capital element to it. So we had to spend that on capital. And what it was used for was refurbishing some of the existing sites, making the spaces more accessible, making outdoor spaces for the families when they came to visit some of the centres, etc. So it was invested into the existing sites to make them more suitable venues and community venues.
So we've the existing Sure Start sites, we've not lost access to any of those. They're all still within, because they were within schools that might have become academies since and so on. So I just wanted to make sure that we still have access to all of those.
So the wellbeing centres is what you're referring to, I think, Councillor Mandarakis, and we still have those in schools. So we have, I think, 9 spread across Medway, but the 88,000 was spent on improving our children and families hub. So our one in Gillingham, Chatham, Wayfield and Rainham and Strood. So if you go into our hubs, particularly Gillingham, the entrance was made better. And if we look at the outside space of our Chatham hub, that was improved as well by that money that came in. So it's improvements to our hubs, not taking anything away.
Okay, just to quickly say, I think the wellbeing hubs was part of it, but I was referring to there was 5 Sure Starts that were closed as part of that process, weren't they? Are they just now, they don't belong to Medway Council anymore, we don't have access to them? Because there was 17 Sure Start centres, and then 4 hubs and 9. So I guess 4. There's 4 that I just wondered whether we still have them.
So we repurposed the majority of the spaces, but some of the spaces were taken from when that Sure Start buildings were cut. Yeah.
And do you want me to pick up the fair funding review kind of point? What we've seen is what's been published nationally at the moment. We are kind of working our way through that. We've got access to some kind of modelling, so there's a company which does some modelling of what that might mean for kind of individual councils. We are taking time to review that. As I said earlier, what's reflected in terms of the 26-27 budget is probably already quite an optimistic picture. Now, the fair funding review is obviously a multi-year settlement as well, which is a welcomed kind of development, really. And part of the issue is that maybe Medway will benefit over that 3-year period, but it may not benefit as quickly as we had hoped over that year because of the fact that there are, to make one council benefit, other councils lose out. So there's a transition kind of arrangement in place to kind of smooth that impact out on other local authorities as well, so it's not kind of complete kind of carnage elsewhere.
Okay, thank you all. No, that's great. Vice Chair.
I move the recommendations at 1.1 and 1.2 of the draft budget and 1.1 to 1.2 of the revenue budget and 1.1 to 1.3 of the capital budget monitoring.
Is that seconded? Thanks, Wayne. And agreed? Agreed. Thank you all. And we move on to item 6, which is Medway Safeguarding Children Partnership, or MSCP, annual report, and the lovely Anna Batty will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the background to the annual report, so working together to safeguard children is the statutory guidance that acts as the framework for all safeguarding children partnerships in England, and working together sets out the requirements of the annual report. Working together was updated in December 2023, outlining 6 key areas, and update strengthened the shared responsibility of the 3 statutory safeguarding partners, which is Kent Police, Medway Council and NHS Kent and Medway. It also strengthened the inclusion of education partners in our multi-agency safeguarding arrangements, and also safeguarding partnerships responsibilities for undertaking local child safeguarding practice reviews. So in terms of the headlines for the 24-25 annual report, so in respect of governance, the MSCP initiated the process for review in their strategic plan and also secured post-16 education representation at the executive group. So there's now representation across primary, secondary, post-16 and alternative provision. In respect of scrutiny and assurance, the annual report includes contributions from the independent scrutineer for the secure estate and the multi-agency safeguarding arrangements. So for the secure estate, it includes an assessment of the preparation for the opening of Oasis Restore Secure School in summer 25 and the relationship with the Medway Safeguarding Children Partnership Secure Estate Safeguarding Assurance Group. In respect of Voice of the Child and Family, the annual report includes information from statutory safeguarding partners on how they seek the views of children and families and how this is utilised for service development. So examples include how Kent Police community forums have included young people, inviting them to comment on the public protection strategy, and Medway Council Family Hubs and Start for Life programme, their dedicated parent carer panel set up by the Medway Parent Carer Forum. In respect to progress against priorities, in respect of effective partnerships, the Safeguarding Partnership reviewed and republished their threshold of need and action, which is guidance for all those working with children and families in Medway. Also, in respect of early help, NHS Kent and Medway Safeguarding Team have re-established the Primary Care Safeguarding Leads Forum, providing a platform for GP surgery, safeguarding leads for learning and to receive updates on statutory reviews. In respect of learning and improvement, the report sets out the headlines from the findings of what's called the Section 11 safeguarding audits and progress against the Section 175 and 157 audits for schools. So these are self-audits for schools and other agencies which the MSCP uses to provide assurance on how partners are working to safeguard children, and they include standards relating to leadership, policy, procedure, training and recording. This section also includes areas of strength and improvement related to local child safeguarding practice reviews and the impact of that work. So partnerships are also encouraged to set out their next steps and priorities for the coming year in their annual reports. So for 25-26, you'll see under governance the aspiration for the partnership to review its structure, considering the strategic plan. In relation to scrutiny and assurance, there's some changes within the independent scrutiny arrangements and also a focus on child sexual abuse in response to national review findings. For the Voice of Children and Family, the priorities are to adopt the child-centred approaches and that to be included in the strategic plan going forward. And there was also priorities around the review and approval of the contextual safeguarding strategy and the neglect strategy. And last but no means least, the MSCP has 4 local child safeguarding practice reviews which are running concurrently in this year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we have half an hour to debate this. Any questions? Wayne?
And I thought this an exceptional report. I just want to put that on the record. But one thing, and actually it's kind of away from the report, but I'd like it if we as a council could also make this aware, because Christmas, although it's fun and great times for everyone, there are some children now who are going to be in a really difficult and vulnerable position. They're away from schools, their friends, their trusted adults. So if we could also just promote the child line telephone number 0800 1111, so that if any young person is in need over the Christmas period, they know where to turn to. That's all I want to say, Chair, and thank you again.
Thank you for that, Wayne. I'd like to echo that as well. It was a really comprehensive report to read, and actually, you know, it gave me a lot of reassurance that we are multi-agency, doing the right thing and safeguarding our children and young people. Thank you. Anybody else? Sorry, Lenny, then Leah, please.
Just one quick question. It mentions about the graded care profile, and I know we've received an email today about training. I just wanted to check, is it tracked by Medway in terms of the attendance, so you know which schools haven't engaged, and therefore reminders are sent to schools so that we can get as many school leaders trained as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a kind of an administrative process in terms of the GCP2 training, so the licence course and also a refresher course. And then the Performance Management and Quality Assurance Group also oversees the data in respect of completion of training, but also use with families as well across the multi-agency partnership. So yeah, both in terms of availability of provision, take-up of provision, and then use with children and families as well, which is kind of our kind of ultimate aim in terms of that performance information. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Leah?
Thank you. So it was mostly around the Oasis Restore. I found the kind of last section of that really heartening, where it was sort of looking at, obviously it's a brand new ethos, and I thought in the fact that it had closed and the fact that it had closed in such circumstances, actually nobody was looking at whether the ethos was working and whether it just needed some tweaking. So I thought some of that was quite interesting around the fact that it did look like there was less in incidents of violence and so on across. But I wondered, is it still likely that the school will reopen in the early new year and work towards full capacity, and whether there'll be a deeper oversight from the Safeguarding Board into that going forward? And then the other bit was about the one-stop shop, which it's noted in the report is well attended by residents. But do all the teams who are supposed to be sending representatives, is it always fully staffed and fully... do all the teams who are supposed to send representatives send a representative every month?
Thanks for the question about Oasis Restore School. I have not been told any different. The school is concentrating on safeguarding, concentrating on reset, and concentrating on delivering an excellent service. That's what they're doing. And as far as the oversight goes, I'm the host DCS, so I have a good relationship with them. And in terms of what's in this report, I can assure you that the independent scrutineer is working closely, and what you see in this report is the quality of oversight and support to that school. So I'm relatively satisfied at this point in time. Yeah, thank you.
So also just to add to that, so the independent scrutineer in this year has introduced an additional scrutiny oversight in terms of incident footage that's been agreed with Oasis Restore, so to add to that scrutiny picture. You asked about the one-stop shop. So in last year's report, previous years. I believe there was some reflection that there was, I think, Kent Police, their attendance wasn't kind of as regular as hoped, but that has improved for this year. So, but I will follow that up and make sure that that's confirmed, but certainly it was an improvement from last year's position. Thank you.
Sorry, just say, not just the police, but just general, kind of all the teams, there's been an improvement.
As I understand it, yeah. Thank you.
Lovely. Sharon, then Lou, then Stephen, and Liz.
Thanks, Jo. On the bit of violence against women and girls, I see you've got the Don't Disrespect campaign, and I wondered if that was because of with programmes like Adolescence and EastEnders running a storyline with disrespect to women and girls, whether we're seeing more of that. I'm just thinking if it's on the TV and on social media, have we seen any more incidents in Medway coming up? And is that Don't Disrespect campaign part of that, or is that part of something else?
So my understanding that's both a proactive campaign in terms of that feedback around, as you say, some of what we know happens on the, what we see on what's portrayed on the television as well as social media. We do know that by having campaigns like that, it can increase or raise the kind of numbers around those issues as people start to recognise what's happening, children start to recognise what's happening, as well as reporting as well in adults. So my understanding, as I say, from those safeguarding partners, it's both a proactive as well as being aware of changing culture, I suppose, for children and young people.
So that campaign's not necessarily for that, but I mean it's a good campaign, and I suppose I just wanted to know if there was a feel that it was being raised in safeguarding issues that over the last couple of years, that it's a new trend, if you like, that's happening.
I think any time there's any situation in the press or in the soaps that people see, that could mean that there's an increase in contacts to the front door, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they will go on to statutory involvement. We do have a violence against women and girls worker, and that sits within Sarah's team, and that's a proactive approach to work with our young people that are in that category.
Thank you.
Okay, Lou. I'm so sorry. It's Stephen.
I thought I'd gone to the loo somehow. Okay. Right. On page 79 of the report, that's page 15, of course. Communication is, I'm not really aware what the communication strategy for 24-27 was, because I'm new to this committee. I'm trying to understand who is communicating with who, especially when you see LinkedIn is showing a massive increase. That presumably is staff talking with staff or professionals talking with staff professionals. I wonder if you can expand on what that communication strategy is, and are there other platforms that the communication strategy includes or doesn't include?
The communication strategy sets out, so the primary audience, if you like, for safeguarding children partnerships is professionals, is the partnership itself. Our communication strategy also includes communication with the wider community as well. And when we say professionals, we mean those paid, unpaid, across all relevant agencies as well. So the details that you'll see, so we do use social media. So for example, when we have a local child safeguarding practice review, when we produce the report, we also produce what we call a video explainer, so that anyone can go on our YouTube channel and have a 7-minute video summarising that review, areas for improvement and what that means for agencies across the partnership. We also have a presence on social media. So for example, we have regular communication around the NSPCC Talk Pants campaign, which is around recognising child section abuse as one of our kind of priority campaigns. So yeah, our primary audience is those working with children and families in Medway, but as part of our strategy, we do have some communication with the wider community as well, promoting those awareness raising type campaigns. So we have, as I say, social media presence. We also have a bulletin that goes out every other month to professionals across the partnership, and we have our kind of annual reporting as well that's available on our website. Thank you.
Follow up: is it desirable to actually have a two-part presentation here? One, those professionals talking to each other, and those going outside to the community that we're supposed to be serving. So you see two sets of data, one internal to the professionals and one not internal to professionals. So you can see that maybe the YouTube is picked up by others more than, and clearly LinkedIn is not picked up by others. I just wonder if that is possible. That might give a better idea where the communication strategy is increasing in line with demand.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we could look at for future annual reports. As you say, that kind of communication within the Safeguarding Partnership and relevant agencies, and then through our community reports. So we keep a track of those campaigns as part of that communication strategy. So certainly, yeah, it's information that we're planning, acting on and monitoring as well in terms of the impact, in terms of people receiving those messages and hopefully then acting on that information as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to our young people next. Olivia.
We were just sort of discussing about the Do Not Disrespect campaign. Could Medway highlight it a little bit more or work on their own, seeing as a lot of, like we were talking about, we haven't really heard about it kind of thing?
Absolutely, yeah. Sorry, I was scrolling down your question, but yeah, absolutely, that's something we can promote through our channels, most certainly, and encourage our partners to do that as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Liz?
Thanks, Jo. Yeah, I had a couple of questions, and one actually just picking up on the same, if it could be sort of promoted more with regard, and especially within schools, because I think a lot of people young people that I talk to, sort of young girls in particular, they get a lot of catcalling, which is really unpleasant for them, to a point where some girls think 50% of men do it, because it just happens to them so often. And obviously it's not 50% of men at all, and that for young boys is quite upsetting that don't do it, because they think, oh, you're bringing me into that. But I think it could really help if there's a lot more education in schools with regards to sort of, obviously the boys not doing it, and for girls how to cope with it and what to do when they're subject to it. Because just walking down the street and, it's quite, scary for them. My second question, I know I've picked this up with you outside of this meeting, and I'm going to sort of have meetings with regards to it, but because obviously it's a public meeting, I wanted to just highlight it, because just concerned that the child death data is not in the report again this year, and I noted it wasn't in last year, and I sort of couldn't find those figures, so I appreciate I'm going to sort of have an update on that outside of this, but I'm just concerned because, obviously we hope that these deaths are not as a result of any kind of abuse or violence or medical negligence. But I'm just concerned at what is happening with that data and what is being done to sort of make sure we get that data so that we can, if there is anything sort of, you know, suspect in there, it's being picked up, because obviously I assume that is the point of getting it. Thank you.
Kelly, then Ailish, please.
Just straight to me.
Straight to Ailish, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your question. Just to give you some reassurance, so every child death overview panel is held in order to get the learning out of that. MSCP are represented at that, our social workers attend that, and as well as our wider partners, including police and health. So the actions and the learning that are taken from that are followed up and ensure that they're embedded across the system. Some of them lead to some of the campaigns that Anna's already spoken about. Some of it leads to a change in practice, for example, things we might ask health visitors to do. So the learning is embedded as that comes in. But you're absolutely right, we have had an issue since COVID about the annual report, and it has been significantly delayed. There will be 2 reports coming out. One will be I think it's 2020 to 2024, so a multi-year report to share the learning across that period. Then there will be a report coming out which will be 24-25. That will draw the key themes from that, and then we should be back onto an annual cycle from that. We work with our partners in KCC and, of course, Health and Police as well in order to produce the reports, and there have been delays, but we're hoping that we're nearly there now. But the learning is live, and the learning is taken from that straight away.
Thank you. David?
Thank you, Chair. Really, this is involved my questions or points that I wish to raise, in fact, is relative to the same points: violence against women and girls, priority 4 on the report, page 20 or 84. I was particularly interested to see that the involvement with the police and the fact that the beat officer for Rochester High Street has been having police and safer Medway involvement, which is always extremely good. But then I picked up on the fact that engagement with the Youth Council, and I'm particularly pleased to see that we have representatives from the Medway Youth Council here this evening, and to me it seems strange, because when I started as a councillor, we were actually allowed 1 member from the Medway Youth Council. And I remember campaigning and banging the table and saying, I think we should double this and have 2. And I'm so pleased that we've got even more here this evening, because after all, these are the young people, and this is what it's all about. Really, my question is, it says engagement with the Youth Council, and if the question has already been answered, then my apologies for bringing it up again. But I would just like some reassurance that the Youth Council, there is engagement with the Youth Council, and what has the Youth Council actually been able to contribute to this particular programme, please?
David, we've done a few steps since I've been in charge of the committee, in terms of our first name terms to be young person friendly. We also sit in a circle and we prioritise our young people, which was why Liz and you had to wait, because Olivia had a good question. We are working with Rob and the team, and I'm so pleased to see a lot of girl power here as well, and Liz and Mark have agreed to be on like a focus group working party, and we're looking to see what more we can do. And Lisa's also put her name forward for that, so we're getting a parent forum perspective, which is always great as well.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put these young people on the spot. That was
Yeah. Well,
not the
I'm just sort
intention.
of saying what we as a committee are trying to do, but because, as you said, David, this committee is about our 63,000 children and young people, and they have to be our drivers. I don't know if our lovely young people want to add anything to that, because you know, you've had an exceptional youth conference, which I found every year. I find A, thought-provoking, B, lots of actions that would need to be addressed. But for me, the level of inclusion and the participation of schools, sort of breadth and width of our Medway, has really gone from strength to strength. You know, because when I first, you know, a few years ago, 2018, attended, there were just pockets of certain mainly grammar schools in lots of aspects. So that has been a tremendous journey that I think we've all been on. Will?
I just wanted to point out as well that we are trying to become more inclusive with our youth conference as well. And we're trying to not only just get schools and get homeschool youth as well. Thank you.
Great idea, thank you. Wayne?
So I just want to add that I think what the Youth Council do is absolutely tremendous. And if you go to any child-friendly Medway event, the Youth Council are there actually fighting their corner, so to say, and really promoting everything they do across Medway. And you already alluded, David, to the fact that the Youth Council being here is wonderful because this is their committee, in all fairness. You know, we're trying to impart and have the child or the young person engagement, and so everything you do should be applauded. And I know I'm very keen on the work that you all do. So again, thank you for being here.
Brilliant, and also your leader, the leader of the opposition, came through that line, so I'm hoping that these three might be where we are at some stage, or actually in the palaces of Westminster. Okay, Vice Chair.
Fine. So I move that we note the report.
And is that seconded? Oh. Seconded by Mark Joy and agreed, everybody. Thank you. We're doing a really great job this evening. We're on item 7, Children Missing Annual Report, and we have 30 minutes for that. And we're over to Kelly and Sasha.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, this is the annual missing report in relation to the children who go missing from home and from our care. It talks about the data and the practice themes that have been found during that year, and then what's going to happen in terms of service improvements for the following year. The committee are asked to note the report. So our response to children missing from home and care is led by our joint operating procedure, which is led by statutory guidance on children who run away or go missing from care, dated January 2014. This guidance outlines the responsibilities of all local authorities, but together with their partners, which would include those you would expect, police, youth justice, British Transport Police. We work closely with other local authorities, but also our education and health colleagues. So the purpose is to prevent children from going missing, but then subsequently protect children when they do go missing. So the background is that we work very closely with our multi-agency safeguarding partners, including particularly Kent Police, to recognise that children who go missing from home or care are highly vulnerable and are at greater risk of harm. They require a joint, together, multi-agency wraparound support and care for them. So children may be reported missing from our care for various reasons. In some cases, they may often be with their friends, but actually, if their caregivers don't know where they are, then it is expected that they take responsible action in order to try and find them, but equally to report them as necessary, missing potentially to police. When we receive reports about children who are missing or have been missing either from home or care, then each and every child is offered an independent return home interview, and it's intended that this occurs within 72 hours of them being found. This is led by 3 return home interview officers who conduct them interviews for children living in Medway and those in care placed outside the area but near Medway. Whilst independence is encouraged, within that year, children were certainly who were placed further away from our care, the social workers and those that knew best undertook those return home interviews. Return home interviews provide a safe space for children to discuss why they went missing, what occurred during the missing episodes, and what support or changes they need to prevent those missing episodes occurring again in the future. You'll see from the data that over the past 3 years, the number of missing incidents involving Medway children, including those placed in our care, has continued to increase, which is also in line with national data and statistics. What we've found in 24-25, common push and pull factors that were identified. Now, push factors are factors that mean children tend to leave their homes or their places of safety, and pull factors is the external factors that encourage and support them to actually become missing. So lots of these factors centre around what you might expect is exploitation, both children and young people being criminally exploited and or sexual exploitation. We often find that these young people are mostly disengaged from education, that actually there is often a lot of family conflict, that there is substance misuse, but also one of the main factors we are finding is that there are mental health concerns, whether that be stress, anxiety, self-harm, etc. We also have some targets, and you'll see that return home interviews completed in 72 hours was 86%. Which is in table A. We maintained that strong performance, and this supports us in understanding that young people are getting the right support at the right time, which then impacts on their well-being with the aim of reducing those missing episodes. However, in summary, what you will see that 134 children were reported missing for more than 24 hours, so the length of time increased, but the length of time and the number of episodes have actually reduced. For children in care in Medway, 110 were reported missing, which was an increase of 12 compared to 23-24. However, while the number of children increased, the proportion of missing episodes attributed to this cohort accounted for approximately 41% of all incidents, which again is a 5% reduction. This indicates that although more children in care went missing, the frequency of their missing episodes declined. An analysis of the data shows that children, as we might expect, aged 15 and over, were the most frequently reported to be missing. Where a child has been missing for 48 hours or more, a multi-agency strategy discussion is convened, and this is led by Children's Services and is a collaboration with our partners, as previously identified, in order to formulate a plan and ensure a robust safeguarding response in order to try and find those young people, but then equally ensure that they get the support that they require once they are found. These children are most often subject to a need-to-know notification, which ensures that senior leadership team are sighted on these children and can maintain that oversight and ensure that the right support and services are in place to find them. So when reviewing performance data, there are contextual factors that need to be considered, which is why the data always doesn't look completely linear. So for example, children who go missing repeatedly, so a return home interview might not be able to be arranged before there's a subsequent missing episode, for example. Reasons why return interviews are aren't often arranged could be refusals from older children. It is a consent-based service because, of course, you can't offer a return home interview and meet on a one-to-one basis with that child if they don't want to do that. So we really have to listen to those children, but equally think about more innovative ways of how and why we might be able to engage them. And often that would be potentially through schools, teachers, for example, trusted adults that they know. Additionally, there are children who their parents or carers might decline the interview, and again, we would look again about how we could persuade them that actually it's in their children's and often their family's best interests for those to happen. We do try and work alongside those parents as well, so if we do get refusals, it wouldn't just be a straight no and we might then go away. We would continue to try and engage them in the interests of the children. Return home interviews tell us that in Medway, concerns continue regarding young people frequenting abandoned buildings and engaging in some antisocial behaviour, and you'll see that particularly along Chatham High Street, and I do know that there's various ongoing support to enable shopkeepers, for example, to try and minimise that, and working with local police and police, child-friendly Medway, the police, sorry, I've got the wrong, the youth service, thank you, in order to pinpoint areas where difficulties and challenges are highlighted. You'd note that earlier I talked about mental health concerns, and these are becoming a particular concern for us alongside our partners, and we're doing our best to work with our key partners to make sure we get the right support for children at the right time. And they range, like I've said, from anxiety, low mood, to self-harm and some suicidal ideation. And substance misuse is also an area of concern for us, again, where we work with our partners to try and minimise the impact of these on children, families and our young people. Therefore, you'll see, as I've said, that there's the joint operating procedures that outline the work that we do with our partners. Performance data shows a consistently positive response to missing incidents and the engagement of those young people within that. There is a robust senior management oversight of missing children, and actually we get daily reports, sometimes twice a day, of the children who are currently missing, and that is spread wide across children's services, so everybody oversees that. You then see that the return home interviews are analysed by the missing and exploitation lead that sits in Sarah's team and compiled into a quarterly report that is then shared throughout our senior management team. A key priority in 25-26 is to ensure that all children in Medway's care, including those placed outside the local area, receive that independent return home interview, and you might have seen that we were really fortunate to get the budget for that in this financial year, meaning that all Medway children, irrelevant of the distance placed from Medway, will now have that independent return home interview offered to them. Our aim is to improve the timeliness and coverage of return home interviews, setting ourselves an ambitious target of 90% completion, and you'd have heard of the reasons why we don't complete that level. It's only at 86, I know that's not far to go, but we do really want to be ambitious for our children and carry on in that engagement of them. And then lastly, what we'd want to see is an increased collaboration between the missing team and commissioning to further consider the push factors identified for the children in our care. So I'd mentioned some of them about sometimes if they're not in education, you know, why are they leaving their placements? How can we work with the staff team to engage them further, perhaps in leisure activities, etc., in order to prevent those missing incidents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I'll open it up to questions then. Lovely. So I've got Mark and David. Actually, I'm going to go Mark, Sharon and David, if that's okay. Anybody else at the moment? Oh, Lisa, I'm so sorry. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Reading through the report, I know it looks like there's been an increase, but if you add the numbers with people outside the area, it's 463 for this year and last year. Just wondering, with the number of Medway children, would that be just children, Medway children in Medway, or would that also include in other local authority areas? Because when you're reading down saying that sometimes it's a bit hard to get the information back when they're outside the area. So I just wondered if that's included in our numbers, or does that get reported on whoever's area they're sitting in? You do mention common push and pull factors, but with that list, if that could be the top 5, that might be 80% on one and 4% on the others. So it doesn't really give a focus for what we're looking to work on. So it would be handy, I know not on this report, and we probably don't have the details, but maybe on a future report. I know with the percentages sometimes, if it's one person, but I would think if you're listing the top 5, it's going to be a greater sort of number on that. And just wondering, you do report that 150 experienced 3 or more missing episodes, and one of the targets from the return home interviews is what support or changes are needed to prevent reoccurrence. So just wondering is that how many in total reoccur, if that's within the same year or maybe over a couple of years, and what sort of success rate have we got on preventing reoccurrence? Thank you.
Thank you. So, yes, you'll see in Table A, what we do talk about is the number of Medway children. So that's all our Medway children, whether they're placed in Medway or outside of Medway or whether they live in Medway. And we've separated them off in relation to the number of children placed by other local authorities. So other local authorities are responsible for undertaking their return home interviews, and we take them on Medway children wherever they're placed. That was the first question. Second question was about the push and pull factors. The push and pull factors is quite a complicated area in terms of being able to separate that off into percentages, because it can very often, and when we know our family as well, it can be different reasons reported, for example, by parents or carers than actually what the children are reporting themselves. It could also be reasons that the teaching staff or youth support staff might tell us are the push or pull factors but aren't reported by the young people themselves. And more commonly, it's probably a mixture of more than one. It's not just straightforward, this is the reason why I go missing. It can be a mixture of all of those. So it would be, I think it'd be quite difficult in order to separate them out, but I understand that's probably a bit more of complexity that we could focus on in the report next year about those particular areas. And then lastly was the total reoccurrence and then the actual success rate. Success rate is profoundly difficult to actually measure, and I think, you know, missing episodes for children and young people are often occur through difficult periods in their life, and it does depend a lot on the support that they get. Not only they get, but their parents get as well. So for us, or their carers, and so for us, what our support looks like is actually isn't just about those children not going missing, because sometimes those children going missing is actually, there's reasons for that, and that's almost a cry for help. So for some children, that's how we know that they then need more support that they might not be getting in comparison to those children that might just, for example, not be in a position where they feel able to go missing for their voices to be heard. So again, we see success as, of course it is preventing those missing episodes, but what's really important about that is getting those trusted adults in place, whoever that may be, to sit alongside those children and to be there for them and with them, whether they're going missing or not. Does that answer that question? Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Sharon.
Thanks, Joe. And Mark sort of touched on what I was going to say. As an ex-foster carer, I used to look after children that were known runners, and they used to come to me. And sometimes, you're right, it was the trauma, it was a cry for help, it was going to see if to have a look at mum, just even if it was afar. And sometimes, I'm trying to remember one particular case I had that a social worker, or once they had returned, or actually the police brought them back, but the thought of a social worker coming to talk to them, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't happen, because I think it's a good thing, but I think we really have to be aware that a child going through trauma, sometimes having an interview so it needs to be a long, like, because I was that foster carer that said, no, you're going to have to leave it, I'll call you when they're ready to talk to you. So it's about that success rate, and if there's something else, sometimes 72 hours is... So I think what I'm trying to say is that sometimes I don't think you should worry that your target's not there, because sometimes it's the correct thing to do for that child, is what I'm sort of saying.
I agree. I think it is about balancing out and not being led by necessarily hitting those targets. In respect to the return home interviewers, so we have 3. None of them are qualified social workers, and that is one of the things that they often lead with when they're obviously speaking to young people about coming out to speak to them, because it can be a barrier. So their background is youth service, family solutions, yeah, just that kind of different background. I think one of them sort of background in mental health, and she's worked at the crisis team. So often that is something they do lead with to try and engage that young person. But they'll often as well know that that young person might not want to talk about that missing incident. So whilst that is the purpose of kind of trying to engage them, they will also say, we can talk about anything you want to talk about. So to try and build that rapport. And I think because there's 3 of them, unfortunately, as we know, children repeatedly go missing. We kind of try to link them with a return home interview officer. We introduce all of them, but try to build that rapport that way a little bit as well. So it's an independent person from their care plan, from any decision making outside of, you know, their child protection plan or anything like that, which I think often helps. So.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing are working with people young people that have been in the care system. It's that thing, isn't it? It's being in the care system that makes you stand out, so it could make you go on the run. And then having these interviews also then says, I'm still part of the care system. Whereas if it was in a family, it wouldn't. It's that thing that I'm in care and I have to do all these things. Whereas if I was in a loving family and I went on, I went missing for 24 hours, it wouldn't be all this big thing. And I think we have to do it. I think we have a duty to do it, but just do it sensitively, I think.
So our response to any child in Medway is the same, despite if they're a child in care or a child at home. And I think, sorry, I've lost my train of thought now. So I think one of the barriers often that we see is, especially when children have gone missing for the first time, is a police officer's picked them up, found them often, or if they've not returned home, they also have a duty to do a safe and welfare visit. So actually they've spoken to a professional and then we're asking them to speak about it. Again, obviously we go into a greater detail and to try and capture kind of an understand and make sure that we either pass that on to their allocated worker or make a contact in and make sure that their service is involved. But I think often sometimes that can be the barrier a little bit, that they've kind of already spoken about it and probably spoken to their foster carer, their parents about it. So it's trying to kind of figure out how we kind of get them to see the purpose of the return home interview officer coming out to see them as well. And trying to balance that with, like Sasha shared, doing that in school, doing it with a trusted adult, doing it on their terms really, what works for them.
Thank you. Will, then David.
Hello. We have 2 questions, so it's me then Olivia. But I wanted to know, is there any, like, have you looked into how many of this antisocial behaviour in Chatham High Street, or the missing people who come up from Chatham High Street are kind of doing this antisocial behaviour because there's like not really many youth clubs or stuff like that? Because personally I feel like if you go down Chatham, the only things to really do are go around the Pentagon and that's really it. And if you don't know these places to go, then there's nothing for you to do after school or whatever. So is there any statistics in looking into these antisocial behaviours and youth clubs? Thank you.
So around statistics, I'm not sure I can kind of say that. I think, so I chair a meeting once a month, which is called our Contextual Safeguarding Panel. And as part of that, there are all the agencies you can think of, from police to health to education to open road, like our substance misuse service. So we often talk about Chatham High Street, and that often comes up in other meetings as well. But in that meeting, we often are looking at what the youth service can do down there in respect of like the detached team, additional funding. I think it started recently, so the police have put some funding in there for Sports Connect as well, to do some activities and some sports down the high street as well. I think it's really, we acknowledge the losing the rec, so in the Pentagon, the space in the Pentagon, and I know there's been lots of conversations with like senior youth worker Erin around that, and there's lots of people trying to kind of promote and look at where funding could be sourced for that, to kind of provide that space for young people down Chatham High Street. But it is, yeah, it's looking at funding and things like that. But that information around the antisocial behaviour, I think, and trying to make it a safe space as well is really key and top sort of priority conversation in that meeting as well. So all the agencies thinking about what they can do, from some of the shops that have been identified, maybe where there are queries about the purpose behind the shop, if they may be encouraging young people to come in, to thinking about sort of our sexual health colleagues going down there and speaking to young people. So whilst there isn't a designated space, it doesn't stop us doing that work and just kind of thinking outside the box of how we do that a little bit.
Olivia, then David.
Well, I was just, like we were sort of discussing, not that I don't know if we can get like a sort of straight answer, but are there, obviously because of the different reasons of why children go missing, but are there any like campaigns in place to discourage running away and instead sort of like reaching out for help before it gets to that point of crisis?
Yeah, so there are obviously national phone numbers, a bit like you were saying, like Childline when we was talking about that, and we can reach out for help. I think we probably could promote those a little bit more. Gone are the days of leaflets and things like that used to sit around, I suppose, in like school spaces and things like that. So we kind of need to think about that. Equally, the schools have got police officers in the schools as well, if you've come across those. So again, that's an opportunity to kind of have conversations with somebody maybe who's not part of the school, not a member of actually the school, but somebody independent. So that's our child centred policing teams, and we work really closely with them in the missing team as well, so to kind of look at what resources are needed. And trying to think of when it would have fallen during this year, this period of this report, where there were some road shows across the secondary schools as well, so looking at sort of just a number of the difficulties that adolescents kind of face out there in the community. So they would have been talking about things like missing and things like that. And there is a new resource. Well, it's not so new to schools, but it's coming into the local authority. It's called Pole Ed. So it's an online resource that schools can access to deliver sort of lessons, I suppose, under, is it PASHE? I always get that wrong, that kind of branding, looking at some of the difficulties that might lead to reasons for going missing, things like online bullying, as we've talked about, exploitation, etc. Yeah, we do have a link in with, so the designated safeguarding leads, Amy, who's the missing exploitation lead, she is able to access like a Teams chat, Microsoft Teams, so she can share information on there as well around communication and what is kind of current and what we're trying to make sure gets to you guys in school, really. Is that all right?
David?
Yeah, thank you. I must say, the reading through the report, I found it so interesting and full of so much information and actual fact of what is going on with our young people across Medway. Not only Medway, but across the whole country. It's I wouldn't say it's endemic, but it's certainly an area that does raise concerns, and I think that effectively each and every one of us that may be associated with working with or with young children and young people have all got a part to play. Chair, you said earlier on at another item that we were discussing earlier, the fact that early intervention is important, and let's get things right at the very beginning. Let's look for intervention. Let's look for what needs to be done to make sure that we don't embark on these problems. Let's get it right at the very beginning. And I think that is still very, very important. And of course, out of this report comes the one thing that really glares out at me is the fact that the need for understanding all of these young people who, for whatever reason, and there are so many reasons that some have been highlighted here, and there's others that no doubt we've all been reading the report and thought, well, yeah, we could add to that list. But the fact is that understanding is so important. It's about relationships with young people. It's about what's happening at home, what's happening at school, the friends and colleagues that they have, their access and association with youth organisations and even football teams and other sports. The list, as I said, it's endless. But every child that does go missing is an individual. And you can probably put a tick in many boxes as to the reasons, but every child is different, and every child has to be dealt with in, I say child, young people have all got to be dealt with in a special way that is, and the solution moulded to suit that particular individual. I'm so pleased that the return home intervention and officer posts, and reading at paragraph 7.2, it makes a point of saying there's 3 RHI officers posts built into the 25-26 Children's Services staffing establishment at a cost of £115,000 per annum. But at one stage there were only 2 monitoring officers, a third post being vacant. And it's so good to see that that third place has been occupied. I think really where I'm coming to is the fact that it seems to be a success story that when officers are employed, when officers are involved with these young people and actually undertaking the interviews and getting to the bottom of what's going on and then try to put into place a program that would keep young people occupied, it does appear to me that lose one of 3 monitoring officers and we know the consequences. Can a case be put forward that says that in fact the establishment should in fact be increased? Is this something that could be considered by the administration to try and get to the problems before they start to head off into the wrong direction? Because let's face it, young person not doing what we think they should be doing, misbehaving, and the last thing we want to see them is to embark on into crime and even worse. Thank you.
Thank you for that, David. Sometimes it's not about misbehaving. I think all behaviour has a reason, and our schools are trauma-informed schools for that reason. But sometimes, you know, as an experienced foster carer, it could be shame. You know, there are so many ifs and buts, but I'm sure Leah will pick up an increase, as you suggested. Thank you. And, sometimes children or young people inside, they're hurting and they just need to chillax and cool off. That, there are so many, as you say, it's quandary, isn't it? But thank you for that. Okay, Lisa and then Liz.
Yeah, thank you, Jo. My question, no surprise, would be, I think it would be really nice to know the percentage of those rescind that are in there that actually are running away or go missing. And also, I'd like to know, if you could, how many were already known to social care? So how many are we already aware of and that actually we could have prevented? I don't know if that's available.
So I don't know if we have that data to hand, do we? I'm not sure we do, but one of the things we're looking at is updating our report. So we've used the same format for the last couple of years. If Chair and Leanne would be happy, then potentially we could have a member working group to look at actually what members would want in our annual report, so that we can make sure that that's included, so that next year, we're ticking all the boxes.
Do you know, I think that will be a really good idea, and Lisa, that's a great point to make. Thank you. Liz?
Thanks, Jo. I was just looking at the figures in 3.16 with the interviews, because it states a figure of 1,420, and then it says that 506 were declined. So I get that as leaving 914. So then I get that as, if 706 were completed on time, that's 77% and not the 86%. But I don't know if it's just me. I've lost it now.
We will carefully have a look at that, but the figures you mentioned, you are correct, but yeah, we'll just check it out. Thank you, Liz.
Because if the percentage is right, it might be that one of the other figures is wrong, but from what's quoted, it isn't, we're not getting 86% target, we're getting 77%. There's quite a difference. So yeah, if that could be checked and brought back to us, that'd be great.
Lovely. Stephanie will get back to you, and we'll when we've looked at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I just had one other question. In 3.13, it talks about ethnicity, and obviously if we're taking data, I assume we're taking it for a reason. Like, what are we doing with that? Because for me, I'm just thinking, if 60% of all cases, it says, oh, the children are described as, or would describe themselves as white, but the 2021 census is like 84%. So there's actually quite a big difference there. If we're taking, I just think if we're taking this information, then we should be doing something with it, and therefore, there's like 20% difference there in the population, and what does that mean, and what would we do about it? How would we work differently to sort of address that concern? Thank you.
Sasha, thanks.
Thank you. I think that's a really good point, actually, and I think that would be something for us to take forward as we revise this report and think a bit more about the so what question. So we've got the data, we've got the analysis, we've got the percent, but actually then so what, and how does that impact on the recommendations and what we want in the following year? So if that can be taken forward in that members group. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Lenny.
Thanks, Chair. It's almost been answered already, but I'll still ask the question. It follows on from what Lisa said about SEND pupils. It'll be interesting to know about other disadvantaged groups, and I particularly look at the figure that Liz pointed out, about 66% of white children. That's the percentage. Sorry, the children missing, 66% of them were white, and I think about the school statistic that. White British boys eligible for free school meals are less likely to achieve academically than any other pupil group. And I wonder if conversely, does that mean they are a greater percentage of this white children figure are the disadvantaged boys?
I couldn't answer that absolutely, but I suspect that as a theory that is probably quite likely. But again, it's something about how we how we really analyse this data moving forward and compare that to other data that we know about the children in Medway and nationally.
Thanks. Alice?
So Olivia was talking about the promoting of the local initiatives across schools using things like PolEd and PSHE and things like that. I'm actually a PSHE teacher, so as the statutory curriculum has just changed and is incorporating lots more things like misogyny and violence against women and it's not all men and increased coverage of mental health, literally all the things that have been discussed, would it be possible that actually the local initiative resources are starting to be disseminated into schools so they can be promoted whilst this change to curriculum is happening? I know that at the minute a lot of the signposting I do isn't local, it is things like Childline and things like that. So if we do have campaigns for things like respect against women, well, respect for women and children going missing, then it would be really, really great for us to be able to plug those into our lessons. Whether that's possible through our DSLs, I just wasn't sure.
Yeah, so we've got a DSL Teams channel, or the DSLs have a Teams channel that is led by our safeguarding leads for education, so Kate and Fiona. So Amy, who's the missing exploitation lead, she can comment, she can add details to that. So I don't know how far that filters down then within the school, and maybe that's something that I could take back to Kate and Fiona and the DSLs maybe around Masha and Mella, and making sure that kind of filters back down.
Okay, Celia.
Yeah, I'll come in on that. It's a really good point. We will take that away and start putting these things, well, they're in Headway, but actually pushing them more through the briefings and not just to the DSLs, but you know, to the designated teachers and through the Senko forums as well, so they get out to schools in every possible way.
Okay, and Damola, sorry I missed you. It's not even my blind eye.
Thank you so much for the report. I actually had a follow-up question to the mention of police officers in schools. So I assume that's just for the secondary schools, not the primary schools. You mentioned that there were police officers in the schools that the children could approach if there was any issues. Is that just the secondary schools, not the primary schools?
No, I believe it's all of the schools,
All
so
of the
they
schools.
are linked.
Okay.
So they're not always present. I don't know if they have set days, things like
Yeah.
that, but they are. So the Child Centres policing team has a number of officers, and then they're obviously linked with the schools across Medway. So if there are, when I was saying about the panel that I chair monthly, if there's a conversation that's there's a score of concern, potentially we might speak to the sergeant who leads that team and kind of ask what work could be done there and what support could be put in.
Yeah, so my question was, for children who may be a bit more timid, you know, can't easily approach a police officer, they're not necessarily they're not friendly, but you know, sometimes a uniform and things can be a bit intimidating. What is the other option outside of the National Child's Helpline that a child like that can use, which is makes it a bit more approachable for them? Yeah, I just wanted to know.
I think what we really try and promote, and we do share information around our children that are currently missing with the youth service. So obviously the hubs, when they're running in the evening, the seniors will be aware of the current missing young people, because often they could turn up at those sessions as well. So I think again it's kind of promoting that they are places of safety to go to as well as kind of the hubs and things like that, because you are right, obviously not all young people are going to necessarily seek out somebody that they see in authority. They might see you know, youth worker as much more approachable. And I think again it kind of goes back to the selling point of Amy's team and her return home interview officers, that they're not social workers as well. So actually they can be seen as clearly that independent person that, you know, hopefully that young person sees a purpose and, you know, a reason to speak to them and get their voice heard that way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. My second question, actually, if I can, was actually around the youth centres, youth hubs. So I understand that obviously there is no permanent youth club at the moment in Medway. If there is, maybe correct me, but I know there's youth hubs that move around to different locations. So I'm just wondering, how are those advertised, and do we have plans to have a permanent space? Which was a follow-up to one of the questions from the youth council.
I'm happy to answer that, and
Okay.
we've got Rob here that's a bigger expert than me. But we do have youth centres across Medway, but we're doing more outward facing activities, because what young people are telling us, they don't always want to go somewhere, so we're going to them. Rob, is
So it
anything?
sort of moves around, just to be correct.
So we've got an inflatable youth centre which we take out, don't we, Rob, in our van, and we go to where there are young people. So we meet with our young people in their community, in their spaces. But when I say it's not a whole building, it's just it's a marker to say, actually, we're the youth service, come and talk to us. And it's inflatable. And it's an innovative idea to be able to take our youth service to young people. But we do have youth centres. So we've got Parklands, we've got Strood, and we've got Gillingham. Rob, other spaces that we've got?
Yeah, so some of the youth clubs we have those buildings. There's like, some of them are hubs, or they're shared with other kind of like services organisations. But we have those kind of like satellite projects around them as well to kind of go out into the community. We also have mobile provision, a van that says youth along the side, which kind of deploys like a portable youth club to some extent for young people. But we work with young people wherever they are. So sometimes that isn't in a building, sometimes that isn't even on the street, sometimes that's in school or college. So we'll go where young people go and kind of work with them there. But sometimes it does look like that, kind of street work.
Yeah, and I think just the last part of my question was more about how it's advertised. So it sounds like there's good work that's going. I just wanted to know how it's...
Medway Youth Service have a great social media presence, and the communications is out there. And I note that in January ONS, we've got the report of the findings from our peer review. So that will share with you all the good work that our youth service are doing, and the areas of improvement that we're taking forward.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay, Olivia.
One of our members is actually watching, and her name's Isha. She had a question. Just sort of about the policing. Would it be a possibility to have a home interview worker be present during the police home visits to help alleviate the pressure when talking to police due to fear of police that a lot of young people have? Like, would that sort of, is that something that you've thought about at all or anything like that?
So we've definitely kind of thought about, because what I think myself, Amy, and her team would really like is not to sort of get to a point where someone feels like they're telling their story for the second time. Often, obviously, police have gone out and done that follow-up visit before. So if a child is missing, if a child is missing, before it can be confirmed that they're found, a police officer will need to visit them and see them, and then we're notified of that. So that isn't obviously in the process at the moment, but you know, it is something to kind of consider, and we've kind of talked about, actually, you know, it is very overwhelming, and that is a process, but actually is that a process that young people benefit from, that they need? So again, something that maybe sort of hearing young people's voices would really be helpful to kind of help structure how we move that forward. And as Sasha shared, you know, our policy around children going missing from home and care is joint with Kent Police, and it's reviewed annually as well. So I would imagine that's something kind of they have to do to kind of ensure that your young people have come back and they're safe. But it is kind of balancing what's working, I suppose, and not, I think for me, not telling the story twice.
Lisa, then Wayne.
I just wanted to really go back to Damanola's first point. Medway also have, through MCH, their Medway Chat Health for young people for age 11 to 19, and that's around, they can talk around mental health, relationships, smoking, bullying, self-harm, alcohol, got all of those kind of things that they could actually, and quite often they can just text, they don't actually have to phone. But we also have Kent and Medway Mental Health Hub, and actually that's really helpful. We refer many parents to that so that they can get support, but also the young people can go there themselves and actually look at that information. So there are other routes, but it's not just that.
Thanks, Lisa. Wayne.
Lisa, you stole my thunder. I was going to say that as well. But in addition, I know I do it through my rugby club, and we've got like 150 people, children, young people at Medway, the Ancorians Rugby Club, and Medway do the same. And I know Mark, with his football, would do the same. It's all about, if you can't speak to a police officer or something like that, you feel nervous. We are trusted adults. And when you're a sports coach, you get that trust, and we're obligated then, if it's necessary, to pass it on and upwards to the appropriate authorities. But if more and more sports coaches and other forms of coaches did that, that may be a better thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes the uniform's a barrier and it's all about relationships. Mark?
Thank you, Chair. It's just on Liz's point about the numbers. I've actually been looking at the numbers. So if you look at the 1420 minus 506 is 914, but I've taken it, the figure you've taken out is about 88 for the 6 point something, what was rounded up, that weren't offered an interview. So of that remaining was 86%. And I think you covered on the 6%, the reason why they wouldn't have been offered an interview is because they may have had an additional in between. So that might just save your officers a little bit of time.
Thanks, Mark.
I was doing my maths as well, and the numbers are right. I think the way that it's written sometimes isn't always easy. So out of the 1,400 that were eligible, 506 declined, which left 822. And out of that 822, the percentage that were completed were done in the 72 hours, which led to the 86%. I'm happy to take a discussion just to the side if you want after this, Councillor Turpin, but the figures are right. I guess when we do that working group about our report going forward, I think it's how it's then interpreted into the report so that we can understand it. But the Carol Vorderman in me says that that figure is right.
Lovely. Thank you all, because that was a really lively, a lively and engaging debate, and I think we did some really analytical questions there. So, Vice Chair.
So, Councillor Brake, sorry, can you just repeat what yours was? Was that the working group around looking at the figures, or did you have a different request? Because I think I got lost somewhere in there.
Increase the numbers of this team that do the in-depth dive, the deep.
Increase the numbers of staff? So the committee notes the report and the proposed areas of focus for the service as set out in section 4, and for the service to look into increasing the numbers of staff within the missing children's team, and then just a general piece of work around looking at the figures, I think, and how they're presented to us for scrutiny. I came out of that.
Lovely. So that was Kelly's idea of the working party. Yeah, thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you, Wayne. And agreed? Thank you. Okay, we're on to item 8 now, and it's the One Medway Council Performance Monitoring and Strategic Risk Summary, Quarter 2, Early Years. Leanne.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm going to take this as read. Mixed picture. However, there is improvements in some areas. I'd like to just draw your attention to 1.11. Support our children and young people to ensure they are safe, secure and stable. The rate of Section 47 investigations per 10,000 is statistically similar to the national average. I've challenged the service to concentrate hard on this area. I think we can do better. I think we need to believe in ourselves that we are a good children's services. You can understand how this remained high, Chair, when we were going through our improvement journey, but there isn't the culture, I guess, is what I'm saying. We need to look at that, and we're doing that through dip sampling. But I have challenged the service to focus on this area and try and bring it in line with our statistical neighbours. And other than that, I'll just take or anybody else can take questions. Thanks.
Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I know sometimes people look at on the performance indicators and 50% showing red. But knowing you, Leanne, you don't like wishy-washy targets. You want to challenge your team, and you set achievable targets that will challenge in the long term. So I looked at the direction of travel, and that looks really, really good, with just one area being in a negative, a downward trend. But then when I looked at that one, it was one that doesn't even sit with your team. So Medway Community Healthcare, the 2 to 2.5 year health things, and seems to be, again, an IT issue, so obviously some cyber issues, but with general trend looking up, and that getting back to target. So yes, I'm really, really pleased that you set hard, challenging targets to push to make sure that we get the best outcome for all of our children. And it's really, really pleasing to see that, barring some IT issues outside of Medway Council, the trend's going in a positive direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Ailish.
Thank you. And just to give the committee some assurance, I've got the quarter 2 and 3 data for the 2.5 year checks in front of me at the moment. So for quarter 2, we're on 83%, and for quarter 3, although it hasn't finished yet, we're already on 83%. So definitely has moved back in the direction that we wanted it to, and actually is exceeding the target of 75% at the moment.
Anybody else?
Sorry.
Liz.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I was thinking back to sort of the last meeting, and I think, Leanne, you got quite a hard time about the REDs, and you gave a very robust answer to that about it being sort of ambitious targets, and I think which Mark has alluded to tonight. So I was thinking about sort of what could then help us with that, because it is difficult when you see a lot of red and you just sort of want to focus in on that and understand it. And obviously this report is the plan is from 2024, isn't it? So I assume that's when the targets were updated from previous targets. So I'm wondering if it would help to have some sort of context of what they were, because I'm assuming if we've been doing well on a target, we will then up it to get better. And that's maybe why some of them are, because we're working towards it. Is it that simple? I don't know. And if it is, that maybe that would help us to see this is what it was, and we were getting an amber or a green, and now it's red because we're challenging ourselves.
Okay, Leanne.
It's not quite as simple as that. This whole plan was reworked because before, when we were on the improvement journey, you had to have different types of targets. You had to have targets that would measure short term, so we could quickly and at pace show elected members that we were on the right track. We were doing what the administration wanted. This is more, 24 to 28. These are more the established, stable, but ambitious targets going forward. So it's a bit like apples and pears, I'm afraid. Thank you.
So just briefly on that. So I guess if we have to look at it, if we're in, obviously we're in 2025, but, the closer we get to 2028, we want to be seeing all that moving is basically how you're looking at it. So not to sort of, okay, we don't want to sit back and go, oh, it's fine, we've got 3 years yet, but we need to understand that it is something we're aiming towards rather than it should all be green now.
Anybody else? Vice Chair?
I move that the committee notes the quarter 2, 2025 and 26 progress of the performance indicators used to monitor progress of the Council's priorities as set out in Appendix 1 to the report, and that we note the strategic risk summary as set out in Appendix 2.
And is that seconded? Yeah. Mark, and agreed? Agreed. Thank you. So now that we're on to item 8, which is the work programme, and we'll hand over to Stephanie, who will introduce the report.
Don't really have anything to add. I'm happy to take any questions. I think the only thing I have missing on there is the outcome of the focus visit, which we should get spring. What's that? It's
Some of you will know that Ofsted came to visit us for a focus visit recently. The outcome of that focus visit, if all goes according to plan, should be published mid-January, but that will be after the next ONS. So can I suggest that that is put on for March, please? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Vice Chair.
I'll try and quickly swallow this mince pie then.
Nice mince pies, aren't they?
Oh. Right. I move that the committee notes the report and agrees the work programme as set out in Appendix 1 of the report, subject to accepting the proposed changes outlined in italic text on Appendix 1, and that we have the focus group outcome, focus visit outcome on the March programme.
Brilliant, thank you. Seconded? Sharon, thank you. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you so much. Have a safe journey home. The tunnel's shut, so don't go that way. Be safe and healthy, and season's greetings.